I'm honestly surprised the gay marriage activists never picked up this guy. It kind of makes sense. Happy feasts of Saint Cyril and Methodius, inventors of the Cyrillic alphabet, patrons of the unification of the East and Western churches. Oh yeah, Valentine's a thing too. You probably know a lot of these pop saint days have their roots in the Catholic Church. In fact, usually if you go to church on St. Patrick's Day, they will mention St. Patrick in the actual Mass. There will be prayers specifically invoking him. That Mass is dedicated to St. Patrick and all the things that he did. But if you go to Mass today, they're gonna say nothing about Valentine. Why is that? Why is there such a thing as St. Valentine in the first place? What does it have to do with candy hearts? And why did the Catholic Church abandon the holiday that they invented after it already got so popular? Okay, part one, just the facts. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is the name Valentine. Valentine means strong, powerful, valiant even, someone with valor. It was a really popular name in like the 200s, and it's still a popular name now. You might have a Hispanic friend named Valentine. There used to be a priest at my church named Father Val, and it wasn't until like years later that I connected it with Saint Valentine. Sorry, Father Val. Okay, various old accounts of saints list 3 men named Valentine who each died on February 14th of their own respective year. One was a priest in Rome, one was a bishop of Interamna. Both of them were buried just outside of Rome in the late 260s, early 270s. And the last was one guy in a group of martyrs in North Africa. And that's kind of all we know about. It's hard to get exact details from when you were the oppressed one, okay? Okay, so there are these old accounts of 3 different guys named Valentine who died for the faith. But the Roman Martyrology, the official list that priests reference when they want to figure out who to venerate in a specific day, only lists one Valentine on February 14th. There happen to be a lot of people who think that the priest and the bishop are actually the same guy. Part 2, fun legend stuff. So this whole maybe the two are the same guy actually explains a lot of the weird stuff when it comes to the story of St. Valentine. Especially that whole he's a bishop but he's in Rome but he's not the Pope, even though there was a Pope named St. Valentine like 600 years later, but he was only Pope for like 2 months. Yay, hagiography! Different sources have different details about the story of St. Valentine, but they all have 3 things in common. Number 1, Valentine healed a young girl's blindness. So different legends will tell you that this was the judge's daughter, and that after curing the blindness, Valentine converted the entire household of the judge. Some people say that it was the actual jailer's daughter, but the story always goes he cured someone of blindness. Number 2, he was arrested and sentenced to death by Claudius II, Emperor of Rome, because he was a Christian. So the places where the stories all split off in weird ways is how and why he got arrested. It was either because he was performing Christian marriages when that was illegal, or it was because he straight up attempted to convert the emperor, and that didn't go so well. Or both. I don't see why both isn't an option here. Number 3, he was beheaded just outside the Flaminian Gate of Rome, which today is the Piazza del Popolo, which I've been to, but I did not know I was like feet away from the martyrdom spot of St. Valentine. Ugh. Pro tip, do your research before you go to Rome, otherwise you're gonna have a lot of moments like that. The cutest detail of the whole legend is that before he was beheaded, he wrote a letter to the girl that he cured of blindness. And he wrote this very sweet letter about faith, and then he signed it, Your Valentine. Oh, that's where we get it. Okay. Part 3, the holiday. So it's like 200 years later, Valentine is officially a saint who is celebrated on a specific day, February 14th, but he's not like a popular saint. He's like a Joseph of Cupertino. You gotta really have read too many books about religion to know who he was. And it was like that for like 800 to 900 years. And then a medieval understanding that birds pair off and couple up in mid-February, and some late medieval poets, Chaucer, and the addition to the legend about St. Valentine marrying Christian couples and getting in trouble for it. Suddenly, St. Valentine's Day is like all romantic. Cue every weird European romantic thing gets attached to St. Valentine and St. Valentine's Day. Somewhere along the line we switched from I am your Valentine to will you be my Valentine? That's an interesting detail. The popular version of St. Valentine's Day happened. So just like the popular version of St. Patrick's or Christmas Day happened. Part 4, the summer of 69, or what is a liturgical calendar anyway? The Feast of St. Valentine on February 14th was established by Pope Gelasius in the year 496. That means that St. Valentine was placed in the Roman Martyrology, that official list that I told you about earlier, and on the general Roman calendar, the calendar version of the list I told you about. By the way, whenever we say it's Saint so-and-so's day, that's what we're referencing. The general Roman calendar venerates this saint on this day. These calendars, they're kind of old and cumbersome, but they're a big part of why Christians all across the world celebrate the same stuff on the same day. They're vitally important for the sense of unity among Christians. But also, remember I said general Roman calendar. That means it's a calendar used by all Roman Catholics and all of Christians descended or split off from them. So basically all of Protestant. The Eastern Catholic and Orthodox churches have a different calendar. And I happen to own a user-friendly copy of each because, like, I'm like that. So on the Eastern calendar, a general term with a lot of nuances that I'm not gonna get into today, mostly because I don't know them. St. Valentine's Day is on July 6th and July 30th. Remember how we weren't sure if St. Valentine was one person or two people? Well, one calendar dealt with that ambiguity by going for the two guys theory, and the Romans just took them off the calendar altogether. Seriously, if your local parish gives away these calendars, look on February 14th, and there's no Valentine. It says St. Cyril and Methodius, baby! In 1969, and actually more than once in the 60s, they revised the general Roman calendar. Some of the feasts actually changed date, and some of the feasts had a revised name, like the Feast of Christ the King. And some saints were just taken off the calendar. These were often saints with, like, historical hiccups in their stories. St. Valentine or Christopher. Who even knows if that guy exists? So the single solitary St. Valentine is not on the general Roman calendar, but he is on the Roman martyrology. And two different St. Valentines have two different feast days on the general Eastern calendar. Or the general Orthodox calendar. This is the part where I screw up. Anyway, the East saw a paradox and an ambiguity and they leaned into it. While the Romans saw the same thing and they decided to back off. I'm not saying that's a good way to stereotype both churches, but I am saying that that's what happened. So happy feast of St. Cyril and Methodius, and may St. Valentine intercede for all of us, especially lovers and those with epilepsy. Apparently. Yeah, I don't know the story about that one. Steve the Missionary is a product of myself, Steve, and all of my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for being a supporter of Patreon for Steve the Missionary. If you're not a supporter yet, please go to Steve the Missionary's Patreon at patreon.com/SteveTM. That's the best way for you to support this channel. Other ways are to contact me through my Twitter at Steve Missionary and my Facebook, Steve the Missionary. I hope you guys are doing well. Have a good Valentine's Day. Make sure to venerate Cyril and Methodius properly on their own feast day. My video next year is going to be about them because they are fascinating. And they're all about the union of the Eastern and Western churches, which I love and need to learn more about. And I have a year, so that should be cool. All right, peace.